Hello everyone, welcome back to our ITT Mentoring Skills Development session. My name's Jenny Fogarty. I'm still the Director of Initial Teacher Training, and I'm back today to talk to you about meaningful support. So we're going to be thinking about providing support that makes a difference to your trainee. As mentors, support is the key purpose of our role. If we aren't being supportive or offering support, what is the point of us being there? We will consider what we mean by meaningful support and the difference between being supportive and offering support, the verb versus the noun. This is our next skills development session, so let's get stuck in. So let's start with how the DfE defines support. What do the Department for Education tell us is the definition of support? Well, they don't. They don't give us a clear definition in any of the documentation, but they do refer to the word support throughout the frameworks and throughout the quality requirements for September 2024. But it's important to take our base understanding of the word and apply it in our context. So typically, we would say that the concept of meaningful support in education refers to providing assistance or resources or interventions that are effective and relevant in addressing the specific needs of, in our case, our trainees. You would have been providing support throughout your career, whether that be to the children or students that you teach or through working with colleagues. Think about those concrete examples you'll have as we work through today's skills development session. Are they support or were you being supportive? Take a moment now to look at the Merriam-Webster definitions of support as a verb and support as a noun. Offering support, the doing of support, can be seen as a way of advocating, assisting, helping, holding or bearing, corroborating, maintaining, comforting. There's lots of different ways that we offer support in a way that shows that we are demonstrating that support. We're active, it's a verb. Alongside that, we can consider support as the noun. So the actual process of being supported and the assistance that's provided. So the actual concrete things, the support itself that we provide as mentor. And there's an implicit understanding here that this is about increasing strength. Support is about bolstering or giving strength to something or someone else. That's a good way of framing this when you think about it in the mentor role. Our job is to bolster or strengthen our trainees' experience and their expertise. As a mentor, I'd like you to think about your role as providing support through active listening. Trainees need to be able to access the support, and in order to do that, you need to be engaged in a dialogue. And we're going to talk later about how we elicit that dialogue. And in our last skills development session, we looked at providing feedback, and that's a way in which we are having a dialogue with trainees. But let's think about the idea of active listening and what that means. We talk about it all the time, and we've probably got some assumptions, but I've adapted this from the work of Ryan and Berkovich and Ayal to think about how we as mentors can guide a conversation where we are demonstrating active listening. So first up, we need to stop talking. Now that might seem like common sense, but it's often the hardest thing to do when you're working with someone who needs support. And it can definitely be harder than you might think, because it's only when we stop talking that we start thinking. We want you to focus on how you're going to respond and actually listen to what your trainee has got to say. So stop talking and actually slow the conversation right down so that you can demonstrate that active listening. You need to check the power dynamic between you and your trainee. Be open to learning something from them, and don't position yourself as the expert in every context that they're going to bring to you. Navigate or guide the conversation. We'll talk about that a little bit more later, but thinking about active listening means that you're not letting it go off wildly, taking up loads and loads of your time, but you're taking some element of control by guiding that conversation. The next one seems pretty obvious, but I'm going to say it anyway. Think about your response. Think about what you're going to say. Our words are hugely powerful as mentors. We are in a stronger position. We're more experienced. That's why we're mentors. So think about what you say and how you say it. Notice body language and non-verbal cues. So active listening is an opportunity for you to step back and observe the situation in the whole. Think about how your trainees' arms are, their legs are, their feet, their face, their head. All of those things give us non-verbal cues about how they're feeling, and they give us an insight into how open they'll be to receiving your support. And then pay attention. Actively paying attention is getting harder. You'll be incredibly busy. This will be snapshots of small chunks of time. How are you demonstrating that you're paying attention? What's your body language like? How open are your non-verbal cues? And then reflect back that conversation. What I've heard from you is that you're struggling with X. What I'm taking away from this conversation is that you need more Y. Is that right? Checking and reflecting back so that you're not making assumptions. And again, this follows the thread that we started when we were thinking about feedback, and we're taking it on to the next step now, the so what. I want to push you as lead mentors and mentors to think about concrete strategies for support. The concrete strategies listed here, they're not rocket science. You're not going to find them referenced in academic texts. They're the nuts and bolts of how we work as a teacher and a teacher educator. And very often they're the things that we've been internalized over years and years of practice. That can make them hard to articulate or break down. It's the things that we just do, but it's not always helpful to say that. Be aware of the subconscious or conscious clues or messaging that you're giving when you provide this support. There shouldn't be any implied judgment. That's not supportive. So be mindful of how supportively you give support. If you're helping a trainee with their priority list, but suggesting that they should just know how to do this by now, that's not meaningful support. And conversely, if you're organising a new set of reading books together whilst talking about strategies to improve their well-being, that is a supportive action and strategy at the same time. So here's a selection, and you'll have many others. Consider brainstorming these together with your trainee and creating a menu of support strategies. This can be invaluable when trainees need support if you're not available. And if trainees can articulate support you would suggest without you being there, that's a great outcome. Use the frameworks to help you. The learn how to statements scaffold a trainee's experience in the classroom. Draw on those. They're going to be what you need to refer back to over and over again. One of the biggest challenges we know for our trainees is their use of time. It's one of the biggest challenges for us all as we get busier. How are they creating a detailed timetable? How are they using their calendar? Linked to that is organisation. As effective teachers, you are a highly organised professional. That is a skill that takes years to learn. So help them agree tasks, what to do when, using a list, prioritising. Why is a task a priority, not just what is a priority? How do we know that as experienced teachers? Observing experts in class, experts in your school, experts that you have access to through digital approximations. Giving an opportunity to observe somebody else can help spark a conversation and improve practice. Thinking about resetting physical triggers, sleep, nutrition, financial burdens. Often what's going on outside the classroom has a huge impact on how trainees behave in the classroom. Are you attuned to those? Are you alive to the risks that trainees will have if they can't pay their bills? A concrete strategy can sometimes be giving permission, letting trainees know that it's acceptable to have a day off, that it's acceptable to say no to additional tasks. Sharing an example from your own experience together. This might be one which you want to discuss as a group now. How helpful is it to always share your own experience? When is it relevant and when can it be unhelpful? Deliberate practice or rehearsal together. Taking time to model what the trainee needs to do and give them a low stakes opportunity for practice can be transformational. And the use of clear and created deliberate routines. Stacking habits can be absolutely vital as trainees build up their confidence and competence in the classroom. They have a clear routine, they know what comes next. And as you practice it, a bit like learning to drive, it becomes second nature. Okay, so now you can see my face and I'm going to talk you through the infographic we've prepared for you to help you with providing meaningful support. So as with our session on providing feedback, it's really important that you feel confident to navigate the conversation that you're having with your trainee. So every conversation should be supportive. That's a given. So let's talk about now the 3 phases. We've created a framework for these conversations, which mean they're more likely to happen and they're more likely to result in meaningful support for your trainee. So the first step is to recognise that support is needed. So looking over here, we can see that taking time to understand the problem is really important, not rushing in and making assumptions about what your trainee needs and how you're going to provide that for them. So asking open-ended question, tell me what's happening for you. How are you feeling? I think you might need a helping hand. If you need to intervene, you need to think about how you're going to approach that. Why don't we talk together about different ways we could approach this? You know, positioning yourself as someone who needs support. Nobody on this course has ever got to where they've got to without support of other people. So recognizing it's okay to ask for help. I do it all the time. So that's the first phase. We're going to set the scene and we're recognizing that support is needed. If we move on now to phase 2, we're going to think about concrete strategies and the difference between passive strategies and active strategies. So there's a range of strategies there. We talked about them on the previous slide as well. So thinking about what are you good at? Taking some time to understand as a mentor, what are your strengths in terms of the concrete strategies that you rely on over and over again? Classifying them, are they passive or are they active or are they somewhere in between? And what difference does that make for your trainee? So if you're constantly providing kind of passive support, well, keep going. Don't worry, it gets easier. We've all been there. It's half term soon. What does that say to your trainee about the support that you're giving? Is that actually giving meaningful support? Whereas active concrete strategies might involve doing shared tasks together, modelling, providing opportunities for them to observe you, supporting them with finding resources, teaching some of their workload together, team teaching, thinking about those actual concrete active strategies that make a difference, working with them on their timetable, helping them to prioritise, suggesting an alternative where they might have come up with a suggestion, providing alternatives. That could be in terms of resources, it could be in terms of ideas, it could be in terms of your own expertise. So really think about the difference between passive and active, because sometimes all the well-meaningful support that we might offer is actually fairly passive. It doesn't actually result in any change, and we're looking for you to be as active as possible. I remember we've talked before about compassionate leadership, compassionate mentoring, compassionate teaching, and that's the idea about noticing something and then doing something about it. So it's more than just being nice to your trainee. We expect you to be nice to your trainee. What it is then noticing and doing something about it. So that's kind of contained in this phase 2 section here, this phase 2 section here, which really thinks about those concrete active strategies. Of course, there's time for passive. It's not all about rushing in and problem solving, but you need to think about the balance that you're getting with your training. And then there's this final part, this phase 3 of meaningful support, which is actually following through. So following up and following through, doing what you said you were going to do, checking that you followed up and that you've done it quickly. So often trainees feel at a loose end, or they feel kind of out to sea because you've talked about loads of things, but there's been no follow-up. So the kind of finishing that feedback loop, finalising the support, writing things down, following it up. If you said you'd talk to a colleague about providing an opportunity for your trainee to go and observe them on a particular session, do you do it, and do you do it quickly? Have you written down an agreed approach? It can just be a few bullet points. You can ask them to write down a few bullet points, but making that note kind of makes it more likely to actually happen when you're a very busy practitioner. How are you demonstrating that you care? So do you follow up? Do you check in a couple of days? How are you feeling now after our conversation? How's the rest of the week gone for you? Do you want to catch up over a cup of tea at the end of the day? And then are you thinking about consulting with expert colleagues yourself to provide more support? So not just being the font or all support for your trainee, but actually creating a network of support around them that you are managing or you're holding, but actually you're not the sole point of contact for support for your trainee. And a few slides ago, we talked about this idea that if a trainee can articulate the support you would give them without you being there, that's a really positive outcome. So following through on your support is a really important way of making it meaningful. We've covered lots of things today in terms of providing concrete strategies for meaningful support. Take a time to go through them, and here's some references and further reading for you. So that wraps up our skills development session on providing meaningful support. I'd encourage you to consider together some of the language cues that you can use that indicate active versus passive support. When might the most appropriate time to use them be? You may also need to reflect on meaningful support you need in your mentoring role. Where does it come from and what might it look like? I'll see you next time for our next skills development session.